You know, I think one of the main reasons people don't smoke briskets at home is because it's very intimidating. You've got a 15 or 18 or 20 pound hunk of meat in front of you and you're not sure how to trim it. Where do you cut? Where do you not cut? What fat do you leave on? There's just so much to know. So in this video, I want to share with you my top 7 things I wish I knew before I started trimming briskets. And by the time this video is over, you'll be ready to go out and buy yourself a brisket, trim it up, and throw it on the smoker. Let's go. All right, the first thing you want to know about beef is it comes in 3 different what I call grocery store grades. There's prime, choice, and select. Prime is the best, choice is the middle grade, and select is the least grade. Now the rule of thumb with briskets is to always buy the best brisket you can afford. Now, today's brisket is a prime, but not because I wanted to afford it. I wanted to buy a big enough brisket where you guys could see what I'm doing with it. And the only thing Sam's had in a big brisket was a prime, of course. Now guys, every brisket you buy is going to be different. Realize there's different butchers that are cutting those things off the cows, and before they put them in the cryovac, they're trimming them up, and some put gashes in them. I had one guy that had a tail on it one time, believe it or not, a tail hanging off of it. Nonetheless, just realize every one of them is going to be different. They're different fatty thicknesses. There's just a whole lot of variables involved. Now, just like humans are different, every cow is different. You know, the brisket comes from the peck of the cow, and just like every cow is different sized, not everybody out there has pecs like I do. What? I got pecs. Shut up. Nonetheless, guys, just realize every brisket's going to be different. Don't expect the same thing every time you tear one open and go to trim it. The next thing to know is the structural differences within the brisket. There are 2 muscles in this brisket. There's the flat and the point. The flat lays on top of the point, somewhat like that, and it comes up here on top, and the point goes underneath. But the way to keep them separate is the point is a rounded end, just like a ballpoint pen, and the flat is, of course, flat. And there's a lot less fat in the flat than there is in the point. All right, guys, the next thing to know is to put your brisket in the freezer for 45 minutes to an hour probably before you go to trim it. And the reason why you do this is you want to make your brisket good and firm, not frozen, but good and firm and hard, because it makes it much easier and much safer to trim. Instead of having it slosh around on you, it sits firm, sits still, and you can be able to slice through it much easier. Now realize, guys, you're not going to ever do a perfect brisket trim. You do 2 or 3 a year. I mean, it's hard to get anything down when you do it 2 or 3 times a year at the most, right? So don't be too hard on yourself when you go to do this and you don't do it very often. Expect to be perfect. It's never going to happen. There are guys out there, of course, who do 50 a day at restaurants, and they're very good at it, but they do it all the time. We don't do it all the time, so don't be too hard on yourself when you can't get it exactly right. But go slow, take your time, have it good and firm before you go to trim it. Next, you need to know there's 3 different kinds of brisket trims. There's backyard trim, there's restaurant trim, and there's competition trim. Now I want to talk to you about competition and restaurant first, and that way when I talk to you about backyard trim, it'll make more sense. Now, competition trim is very different than anything you'll ever want to do at home. They actually separate the point and the flat from each other and trim out a very small piece of each one of those to smoke for the competition. It's not one you want to eat with or one you want to serve people with, other than the judges, of course. Not something you'd want to do at home ever that I know of. Now next is the restaurant trim, and there's 2 components to the restaurant trim that you got to keep in mind. One, a restaurant needs to make sure they trim that brisket to where it has a great bite every single bite, because they want that customer to come back. So they may trim a whole lot more than you or I would in a backyard trim, but the restaurant trim is going to be a very tight trim. Make sure they get a very good even cut. Every brisket bite is very good. And then lastly, also, they're going to be able to use every bit of the meat they trim off, or most of it, probably 90% of it. They're going to make it into sausage or grind it up, put it in burgers. So it's definitely a much more aggressive trim than you're going to do with backyard. Now with backyard trim, we really kind of don't care, so to speak. Now, there's things we definitely want to do, and I want to show you those when we go to trim this brisket up here in a minute. But you want to make sure there's certain things you do and certain things you don't do. You don't have to do. It's kind of like a who cares. No one's judging you. If your family's judging you, tell them to go out there and do it themselves, right? So you don't have to worry about getting it exactly right like you would for a restaurant trim or even a competition trim, of course. So those are the 3 different kinds: backyard, restaurant, and competition. If you see someone else doing something on YouTube where they're cutting the brisket in half or doing something crazy, that's not something you want to do, especially if you're just starting to do briskets. So just worry about the backyard trim, which we're going to do right now here in a second, and you'll be perfectly good to put on your smoker. All right, so next, we want to make sure we're using a very good sharp knife. Now for years, I used what's called a boning knife, which is this kind of knife right here. Now this boning knife did a great job for me. I'm very comfortable with it. Started using it many years ago. Love the thing, does a great job. But then one day, I was watching YouTube and I saw somebody trimming a brisket with a big slicing knife, just like you see right here. And I kind of laughed. I thought, what in the world is that guy doing? That's a gigantic knife you're using there, buddy. Why are you using such a big knife to trim a brisket with? Well, I started laughing at him. But guess who's laughing now? Whoever that guy was, because I am now using a slicer knife to trim my briskets. This thing does a fantastic job. I gave it a try after that just to see what he was doing. Wow, it's so cool. It's a great job. The reason why, guys, you can cover so much area with the knife and keep it very even. You're not chopping with that little boning knife, having to do small cuts. You can do full big slices to slice off fat and cover the whole thing, keep it much more even. You've got longer slices you can do along the sides. It's just a wonderful little knife, a long knife to use for brisket trim. I think this thing's fantastic. Now there's other knives you can use. It's called a breaking knife. You can use something like that if that's all you have, something really good. You want something long and sharp. You can even use a butcher knife if you wanted to. I mean, something like this, or a little chef's knife. You know, this is what I used to use, and I still use it for parts of the brisket, maybe to round off the edges, which we'll show you in a minute, round the edges off a little bit. But this is the knife I usually use for the big cuts, the slicing knife like this right here. I'll put one of these in the description below so you can look at it. They don't have to be fantastic quality, guys. It's something you can sharpen easy and trim a brisket with. So don't worry about getting a really nice fancy one. Just get something that'll do a good job and it's easy to sharpen. So don't worry, we're gonna go ahead and trim this brisket up in just a minute, but I wanted to make sure I shared everything with you before I started cutting on it, because I'm afraid I'll forget to tell you while I'm cutting. Now the next thing you wanna make sure you do is make sure you cut off all the edges that'll burn, and also make sure that you cut off all the fat that won't render. And I'll share that with you, and I'll show you all that stuff when we go to trim the brisket here in a minute. That's two big things. Leave a fat cap on there of 1/4 to 1/2 inch of fat cap. Cut the decal, the mohawk, all those things. I'll show you all that stuff when we go to do it in a minute, but keep that in mind. We want to make sure we don't leave any exposed edges that aren't rounded off, any sharp edges, because they will burn, and cut off any kind of fat that won't render, because that's just wasted space. So we'll do that. I'll show you how we do that just in a second. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go ahead and trim this thing up now, guys. So here's our brisket. It's a prime grade from Sam's. It's 18.77 pounds, which is usually a little bigger than what I get. Usually like a 15 pounder, but this is, like I said, I want to get a big one so you can see it all very well. Now I'll take my slicer knife. I want to cut right along this, what's called the decal fat, just so I can cut the wrapping open. Because I want to cut that fat off. I'm gonna dab it and pat it dry. This actually looks pretty good, guys. Looks like it's gonna be a pretty decent brisket here. So first things first, we're gonna inspect our brisket. I look over the whole thing to see what I've got to deal with. This edge right here, you'll see how thin that edge is. See how much thicker this is right here? This edge gets very thin and floppy. Now, we're gonna cut that off. We're gonna cut a whole lot of that off, and I'll show you when we get there. But the reason why we do that, guys, I wanna show you why it's full, because it's much easier to see what I'm talking about when it's full like this. When the brisket starts cooking, it's gonna draw up. I mean, this is this big, it'll probably be this big time we get through, right? It's gonna shrink a whole lot. But when it does, it pulls this thin edge up, so it curls. And what happens when that curls up, you get pooling right here, and that pooling ends up washing off your rub. You don't want that, of course. You wanna make sure you get that good and thick so it doesn't curl up like that. You don't have to worry about the juices washing off your rub. It's actually very thick. I would take this off either way. I'm gonna take off that whole corner right there. We'll get this decal out now too. Should take that off first, guys. Well, take that back. There's a big, not gash, but a big fold there. It wasn't really part of the butchering problem, but there's a big fold there. Never had something like that before where it folds over. We're gonna take our knife, we're just gonna cut that off, and we'll cut this decal off as well. This is called the decal right here. Now, a lot of people actually take their fingers and dig that out. I do that sometimes. You don't have to. I think it kind of helps the structure hold up better if I leave it in there. It was not going to render very well, so I got to remember it's in there when I go to slice my brisket when I'm done. But all this fat on top, I'll just take my knife and just slice it right off. And guys, you're going to take some meat. There's just no way around it. I mean, once you get better and better at it, you may do it to where you don't take much meat other than silver skin or fat. That's all you really want is a silver skin and fat, but you're not always going to be able to do that. See how much I'm getting off there at a time? It's just so much better than that little boning knife. You can really get so much more off at a time. And you're gonna take your hand and put it under there so you can prop it up some. Now, here's something you wanna know about is this ball at the end of the brisket. This little fat right there, it's not gonna do real well. So usually you just take that off completely. I save all my meat like that because I'd make smash burgers probably twice a year on the brisket shavings that I have. So I'm gonna take it and just kind of roll it off and take it off that end right there. So I'm just gonna kind of come right here. Quite a bit of meat in that, but I'll take that and I'll trim all that meat out of there, but that would not have done very well during a smoke on the back end of the brisket like that. Next thing I like to do is I take this side off completely. Start up here and get it all the way even so I get that fat off the side, and plus I can see much better what fat I have on the top side of the brisket. Remember, this is the bottom, so I just come through here and take it off the sides right here. Remember, again, this is going to be something I can save and separate the fat from the meat. Take the whole side off. There's a lot of fat there that's really bad, hard fat that's not going to render, so I'll try to save some of that meat out of there for sure. Here's what I wanted to show you guys, the flat and the point. Right here is that fat seam. There's the point, and there's the flat on top. There's the fat seam that separates the two. Competition trim guys will actually take this fat seam and cut right through that and peel that flat off of the point, going down through there, following that line right there. But there's the point, and here's the flat. Now there's a lot of fat there on the bottom of the point, on the top of the point, I guess you could say, because we'll turn it over here in a minute, that's gonna be the top. Now, we want to do the best we can to get this brisket even. Might not be possible, but we want to get as close to even as we can. Now, when we to do that, we're gonna take this mohawk off right here. There's a big chunk of fat right there underneath that. There's not much meat under there at all. You see how it's looks like a mohawk kind of. We're gonna take our knife and just chop it all off, pretty much down to here, it looks like. I'll try to line this up with my knife and I keep it level so that I can get the right amount of mohawk off. So guys, there's not much meat in this mohawk at all. There's just a lot of hard fat. I'll probably trim that out, try to get as much as I can, but see how much more level they are now? And I can actually trim some more of that off. I think I will actually. I didn't get all the way down to where I could have gotten. Just trimming off excess fat here and there. Notice there's a whole lot of fat right here. See that? It's not really too bad, actually. I've seen some there's 2 and 3 times that much, like up to here with fat. This is where experience tells you a lot, guys. You can feel in this fat how soft it is, especially now that mine's thawing out pretty good since I've been working on it. This video, it's not really nearly as cold as I like it to be, but it's okay. But you can kind of feel that it's not all that thick, especially through here. So you can be trimming fat, all of a sudden you're down into the meat and you're scalping your brisket. That's what you want to try to avoid. It happens, don't worry about it, but that's what you try to avoid. So we're gonna cut some of this edge off here, this fat off this edge. We want it to be 1/4 to 1/2 inch, somewhere in that range, because what happens is you want to have a ribbon of fat on every single slice of flat that you cut, because that's your flavor of your flat is coming off that fat. People can pull it off if they want to, but I highly advise not to. That's your flavor, the juice you get off that fat. So what I want to do now is just take this and slice a little bit right here at a time. And I'll fold this up and I'll make sure that I'm not getting into the meat. That's what I'll try to do, is avoid getting into the meat. Now, I can already tell down here it's going to be a lot closer to the meat as I cut it. I try not to actually do these sawing motions. I want to just do sliding, but where my brisket's not very hard anymore, it's hard to get it. If it was good and hard, I could probably just push my knife through it, especially if my knife was good and sharp. You could push through it, and it does a much better job of not letting your brisket pull up, like we talked about a minute ago with that tip of it. You can kind of see just barely there. I got a little thin right there, but it's perfectly fine. It's not bad at all. Maybe a little thick, but I'm trying to get through, guys, so I want to move on because I want to get here before it gets dark. What I want to do now is I want to turn this back over, and I want to get rid of that real thin edge there. You kind of have to, because if you don't, I'm going to cut this and straighten this edge up a little bit right here. If you don't, you'll end up having burnt edges and not very good brisket. So we want to get rid. We won't worry about the looks. It's just the burnt edges just aren't fun to cut through. They fray, and it's just not good. They just dry out, and it's not a fun thing to cut or a fun thing to serve. Now, we're looking at the side right here, this thin edge compared to this edge. We're gonna get probably like that. We're gonna save as much as we can over here because we're gonna lose quite a bit right there. I'll just kind of trace it like that right there. Now, I'm gonna wanna end up rounding this off better, especially this corner over here, because it's not very well rounded now. I don't want any sharp edges. So there's a good chunk of meat right there. We will definitely save that, put that in the freezer. Probably leave that fat on there because we want some fat content in our brisket smash burgers. And now you can look and see how much bigger and thicker that is, and it won't curl up nearly as bad when we go to smoke it. But I do want to round this corner off right here. Look at the massive fat there. We don't want that much fat. That fat won't render. It's very hard fat. That won't render very well at all. Not too bad looking brisket, what we started with. I could probably round that off with more, but I want to save as much as I can because I'm not going to get rid of too much brisket here. But actually what I like about it is it's pretty well even. Sometimes you get the points way up higher than the flat, and that makes it, you know, the pooling really bad. This is still a little higher than this, no doubt about that, but it's a lot flatter than they can be, that's for sure. I could take this decal out. A lot of people do. Feel free to. I'm going to leave it in this time. It's not huge. For the size of brisket this is not a very big decal, so I'm not too worried about that. I've seen decals, you know, much wider and longer all the way down the side of a smaller brisket, so I'm not too upset with that. Now this is the top. Don't forget that this is the top of the brisket. I'm going to get rid of that right there. That's some sloppy fat right there. It doesn't render very well. It's just kind of soft and gooey. All right, so that is now ready to season. Now, one thing I will talk to you about is also the edges. A lot of people talk about rounding off the edges because when the heat comes up from the smoker, it can catch those sharp edges on that side right here, and then that's what dries out. When you go to slice your brisket, you end up having fraying there because it's all dried and it looks just like a big mess of nastiness laying right there. It's not cool at all. So you want to try to round those off best you can. These aren't too bad over here, but that right there, I need to round it off a little bit. A lot of times I'll just do it from the side like this. Can't do it. This knife's not sharp anymore. The last thing I want to talk to you about, guys, number 7. We went through 6, we're going to number 7 now, and that's going to be to make sure you set your brisket up for success. Whatever you cut, however you form it right here is how it's going to cook, and you got to remember that. It's something that is very important. However you put it on the smoker is how it's going to cook. So we're looking at our brisket, and the one thing we got to do is we got to make sure that we slice it against the grain. Now, what a lot of people do is, if you can see, the grain's running this way. You can see how the lines are going right through here. Hard to hold on to, but the grain's running this way, guys. You can see that. What a lot of folks will do is they'll take their knife and they'll cut a straight edge right there. So it tells them they need to cut this way. What I like to do is take a picture of the brisket. So I'll take my phone, lay the brisket like I've got it. I'll put the point on the left and the flat on the right, and I'll take a picture of it from right above it so I know that, and I'll lay my knife on the brisket and take a picture of it. So I know that when I've got the brisket out of the smoker, because when I season this thing up, guys, I can't see the grain very well, especially after it's been smoked. You're not gonna be able to see the grain. So I'll lay my knife across it. That's telling me I need to cut that way, take a picture of it, and that way I've got that picture. So when I put the flat on the right and the point on the left, of course I've got it upside down right now, turn it over the other way, and I'll know that I've got to make sure I slice it that way, because that's hugely important to the texture and the chew of your brisket. A brisket that's not actually cut against the grain is a terrible chew. You think you did a terrible job, and it's really just the way you cut your brisket. By all means, make sure you cut against the grain and set yourself up for success by doing a picture of it just like I've got it right here, and that way you'll know. Super simple. All right, folks, there's the top 7 things I wish I knew before I started trimming briskets. Now, hopefully you got some value out of it and got some confidence enough to go buy a brisket, trim it up, put some seasoning on it, and throw it on the smoker. I think you'll be surprised how well you can do. Now, guys, if you like this video, please make sure you click on the video here. It shows you how to smoke a brisket a couple different ways. Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. Certainly appreciate that, but please like the video, subscribe to our channel. Until next time, guys, I'll meet you at the smoker.